Good morning. We are here for our Thursday morning live video coaching training, whatever you guys want to call it. If you see me shift, it's because there's sun coming in and it's blinding my glasses. So I take my glasses off. So if you see me switching here, that's what's going on this morning. I'm trying to avoid the sun. Hey, listen, this morning's topic is one. It's on TikTok, it's on Instagram, it's on LinkedIn. It's everywhere. Wall Street Journal, Good Morning America, Today Show. And it's this idea of quiet quitting. And it's been popping up on my phone and in my news feed all week long. And I was like, what is this quiet quitting? I've never heard that term before. But what I love about this topic this morning is I kept seeing it in my feed over the past couple of days, and I thought, what is that? But then I spoke to a group on Tuesday afternoon, and a young man said to me, he's like, how do you define work? And I thought, well, that was an interesting question. And I said, what do you mean? Like, can you elaborate? And he said, yeah, like, what is work? Is work somewhere you go just to collect a paycheck? Or is work somewhere where you really need a mission and a purpose and you want to have impact? He said, so that's my question for you. What is work? And no one's ever asked me what is work or how do you define work. So I kind of thought about it for a second and I said to him, what I love about your question is you're basically asking me the philosophy of work, which is also what this idea of quiet quitting gets to. So I thanked him for the question and said, I love that you want to have this conversation, so let's have it. So I had it with him on Tuesday. I'm going to have it with you all this morning. So grab a pen and paper if you want to take notes. If you just want to listen, you can come back and watch the replay. But let's talk about what quiet quitting is, and then let's talk through some of the pros and cons, but also some things to think about with quiet quitting. But let me just say, like, out of the gate here, freaking awesome kudos to Gen Z that you're willing to speak up on these topics. Yeah, it's a TikTok trend. Okay, really it's not. It's on YouTube, it's on everywhere, but it's that you guys are actually giving voice to the things that people in my generation, right, late 40s here, we didn't talk about. We were never allowed to talk about it. It was not, it was not the cool thing to do to talk about whether you wanted to spend your life at your job or not. You just went to work and did it. And as you guys have heard me say so many times in these videos, that your self-worth is not tied to your job. Well, kudos to Gen Z because you figured out that exact premise that's taken the rest of us decades to figure out. You guys are figuring it out very early on in your careers, and you're asking the question, what is work? So, quiet quitting, what is work? Let's jump into it. This idea of quiet quitting is basically you go to your job, you do what you're asked to do, no more, no less. You go home. You're not answering emails after you leave. You're not available 24/7. You're not opting in to the hustle culture. That's basically what quiet quitting is. You've decided, and you guys write this down, you've decided you want to work to live, not live to work. And that is a fundamental shift. And how you think about your job is that it's a means to an end. It's not who you are, and you are finding purpose other places in your life. That's why I said kudos to Gen Z, because these conversations have been so, no one talks about them for so long that now you're actually saying, hey, you know what? I have a job, but it's not the only thing I do. It's not who I am. So this idea of quiet quitting is you do what you're expected to do, no more, no less. You collect a paycheck, but your job is not your life. Now, for those of us who are probably not Gen Z, we call this setting boundaries. This is work-life balance. This is all the cliches that have been jumping out for years that people have debated, talked about, struggled with. But at its very essence, Gen Z is now saying to us, we need to have a conversation about work-life balance or about boundaries. Let's actually take work-life balance out of it. Let's just talk about boundaries. We're having a conversation about boundaries and what is the role that your job plays in your life. Now, I so love this topic that I'm actually going to develop a whole course content on it. that I'm going to roll out to young professionals later this year because I'm just that inspired that they have figured out what the rest of us have not. But let's jump into the pros and cons here because, as I said to the young man who asked me the question, this is not new. People have kind of decided for years that they were going to set boundaries. When I led a team, a large team, I actually initiated the boundaries conversations with members of my team because I knew they wanted to have it. You could tell they wanted to have it. They kind of jump around it, but they would never come to me directly. So I made it a point to initiate the boundaries conversation with them. Hey, when you leave and go pick up your kid from school, awesome. If I need you, I know how to reach you, but there are more important things than you being tied to your email once you leave here. So those kind of boundaries conversations have always happened, but they've never been as pronounced as they are right now. So I want to capitalize on this quiet quitting idea to ask you, what role does work play for you? What does work mean to you in your life? Now, the pros of quiet quitting are just that. It is setting boundaries. It's setting boundaries for what you want out of your job, but also, again, I'm going to say it again, also understanding that you're working to live, you're not living to work. So if you say, I go to work, I have a job, I collect a paycheck, but that's not who I am, absolutely those are the pros are quiet quitting. You're not checked out. Now that's one of the myths that I saw in all the articles I read. People are checking out. You're not checked out. You're just redefining the role that work plays in your life. So Gen Z, when people tell you you're checking out, you're not checking out. You're teaching all of us a lesson to clearly define what work means in our lives. I figured this out years ago, and I'm going to say this and you can write this down. Your job is never as loyal to you as you are to it. And actually, somebody posted, I don't know where my phone is, somebody posted on Instagram the other day that a guy literally died. And within 7 days of him being gone, they were already talking about how to replace him. And the post on Instagram was, don't love a job that doesn't love you. Don't be loyal to a job that's not loyal to you because you are replaceable. Now, that was a very stark kind of Instagram message, but it kind of came back to this whole premise that we're talking about today, which is what is the role of work in your job in your life? So, the pros of this, you're not checking out, you're setting priorities and you're setting boundaries. And I'm going to celebrate that all day long. So, if you're someone who is quiet quitting, whether you're Gen Z or Gen X or Gen Y or whatever, kudos to you that you figured out what it took the rest of us decades to figure out, which is we are not our jobs. Our identity is not our jobs. Our self worth is intrinsically not tied to our title or our jobs. And the pros of this are you need to figure out if you're quiet quitting right now, why are you quiet quitting? Is it because work plays a different role in your life, or is it because you're moving on to the next thing, you're in a temporary job? You need to kind of answer the why question as you're talking about the pros of quiet quitting and why you're choosing to go down this road. Now, the cons are what everybody's going to tell you. Are you going to advance in your career if you're kind of quiet quitting and just doing enough to get by? Well, guess what? Not everybody wants to advance in their career. I climbed the corporate ladder. I did the, 18-hour days and all. Now, that's not for everybody. It was a choice I made. But people who are saying right now, I don't want that life, the hustle culture is not for me, then while that's being painted as a con of quiet quitting, it's you're making a choice about your priorities and you're setting boundaries. It's not a con because you're opting out of that lifestyle. So I kind of put it under the con category. So everybody's like, oh, are you sure you're not going to advance? Not everybody wants to climb the corporate ladder. Some people want to go start their own businesses because they're inspired to serve others. Other people are in a job right now while they're trying to figure out what's next for them. And all of that is okay. I'm here to tell you this morning, all of that is okay. So when you see the cons of, oh, this is going to hurt your career and, the company's not going to appreciate this, understand that there are many of us who've been in jobs that we were more loyal to than were loyal to us. So a con of is that opting out of the hustle culture? That's up to you to decide. I'm not going to say that's a con. I think that's setting priorities. I think that's a great idea. But as you make those choices of quiet quitting or boundaries or setting priorities or whatever label you want to attach to it, the important thing is that you know, yes, you have your time to go spend on other things. Maybe that's a con to some people that you're opting out of the hustle culture, that you don't want to be, at the top of your, career or, whatever title you're looking for. That may be a con to some people. It may be a pro to other people. So just understand there's an opposite and equal reaction for every choice you make. If you want to quiet quit, that's a choice you make. Understand you're choosing this path. It may not help career advance it. It may not get you to where you want to go, but maybe right now, for where you are in your life, you're saying, I don't, I'll go back to the hustle culture later. So if that's a con for you, it may be a pro for someone else. If it's a pro to quiet quit for someone else, it may be a con for you. So understand this whole, I don't care what article you read, what video you watch online, everybody is painting this as good or bad. It's not a good or a bad question. It's a where are you in your life right now question. What are your priorities? Are you living to work or are you working to live? So I come at this by simply saying this morning, I love that we're having this debate. I love that there is now a conversation of do you want to be part of the household culture or do you not? Do you want to set boundaries from your job? Do you not? What is the role that work plays in your life? And kudos to Gen Z that you're forcing this conversation with your boss, maybe with your partners or spouses or friends or whomever, but it's a long overdue conversation to have. Now, somebody's going to say, what are you talking about? We've been talking about work, life balance and priorities and boundaries for years. We have, but it was always the quiet conversation. It was always a quiet conversation because nobody wanted to be that person. Well, now it's no longer a quiet conversation. It's on the front page of newspapers, it's on videos, it's trending. Millions of people are watching videos about it. And it's like, yeah, maybe the pandemic sparked this, but it's a long overdue conversation about are you living to work or are you working to live? That's the ultimate question that this idea of quiet quitting is getting to. So, for the young man, gentleman who asked me on Tuesday, what is work? I applaud that question, but even more, I applaud the philosophy that is behind that question. That it took me a long time to realize that my job is never going to be as loyal to me as I am to it, which is why I started my own business. I said, if I'm going to work that hard, I'm going to do it for myself and work for great people that I want to work for and represent great people who I respect, not dealing with the jerks and the toxic people and the drama that follows you every day in a large organization. So it took me a while to find my priorities. If this quiet quitting conversation would have happened years ago, hallelujah, I would have been so much better for it. But it took me years to get to where the 20 somethings are now. So I applaud, man. And my sound effects are not working this morning on my video, but I would have applause right now in the background of kudos to you guys for forcing a conversation about priorities and the role of work in our life. Everyone says the pandemic has changed our perspective. It has. I'd love to think we had a different perspective before the pandemic, but if this is a result of the pandemic, then so be it. It's a conversation that needs to be had. Your self worth is not your job. Your identity is not your job. You have other priorities in your life. And if you're not Gen Z right now, let me ask you this question because I see there are comments coming in, and I'm gonna jump over to those. I see the chat is alive and well, and I always listen. I love that you guys come in hot with your questions and your comments, and I'll get to those in just a minute because I always love the conversation that we have here. But if you're not Gen Z, let me ask you this morning: what does work mean to you? What is the role that you want work to play in your life? You know the old adage and the old saying, right? You never get to your deathbed and say you wish you would have worked harder. So, what's the role of work in your life? Are you quiet quitting? Are you setting priorities? Have you decided there's much more to life than just being in front of a computer every day, all day, or being at a job that you hate that's literally sucking the life out of you? And we all know it. I just got off a call this morning with someone about a toxic work environment. Guys, we've all been there. Some of you are there right now. So I leave you with that question this morning. What can you learn from quiet quitting and from Gen Z? What can you learn? I love this conversation is happening. Like I said, I'm going to develop a whole course on this because I think this is the question of our time, forced by the pandemic or not. Reevaluate your priorities and answer the question, are you living to work or are you working to live? So, quiet quitting is not a new trend. That was the title of this video. It's not a new trend. It's been here for a while, but now we're forced to have a conversation we were scared to have before or we were embarrassed to have before, and now we're having out in the open. So Gen Z, man, kudos to you guys. You guys rock for bringing this forward. And I love that you figured out what's important in life well beyond and well before most of us who are older than you. And that's not everybody. I'm not going to paint a broad brush. Some people have had their priorities and boundaries conversations. But for those of us who haven't, who never figured it out, I love you guys for bringing this conversation forward and forcing us to redefine work in this post-pandemic age. So Chris Prouty, let me jump over to the comments this morning, the chat. I wonder what the second order consequences of quiet quitting will be. Hey, Chris, will uh, you're challenging me this morning, which is great. Do you want to explain what second order consequences in the chat so that people know what you're talking about? I don't want to steal your thunder there. I'm in your program. You're my coach, right? So I know that you explained that to me, but do you want to explain what second order consequence means for folks in the chat? That would be awesome, and I'll come back to that comment. Eileen says, good morning, Eileen. Thank you for being here. Get hired rapidly. By the way, if you're looking for a job, reach out to Eileen. She's in the chat. You spend so much time at work, it would be nice to have some time that is solely yours. Balance is possible. Balance is possible. Eileen is spot on. Balance is possible. 100%. But first, you need boundaries and the ability to set them wherever you want, with whoever you want, or what. Oh, I love this. I'm going to leave this on the screen so folks can screenshot this or write this down. But first, you need boundaries and the ability to set them bring it back, wherever you want, emphasis on you, with whoever or whatever suits your needs best. And I love what Eileen is saying there, because it's not a one size fits all conversation. And for so long, we've made this idea of work, career, you had to advance, you had to be on the path, you had to do X, Y, and Z. And I love that Eileen is saying, you know what, this is not a one size fits all conversation. It's a redefining moment. It's a redefinition that's different for all of us. You guys have heard me say, I kind of redefined my attitude years ago, and I continue to do that all the time. You know, even with the passing of my father, I'm like, there are no bad days anymore. I don't wake up complaining anymore, because every day is a good day, and every day that you're above ground is a good day. So I love that Eileen is saying that. It's not a one size fits all conversation. It certainly has not been for me, as I've kind of figured out what work means for me. But I love that Eileen, who coaches so many people on their job search journey, and she's part of their professional journey, that she sees this as well. So, and Eileen, you're on YouTube and LinkedIn this morning. So is Chris. I love that you guys are on both. Chris says the generation before boomers was called the silent generation. Bingo. Characterized as being thrifty, respectful, determined, and reserved. I wonder if this is the renaissance of that generation. Chris, that is such an excellent point. I'm going to bring that back up just so people can see that on screen. You're right. And I didn't think about that. So thank you. That's a great point about the silent generation and the generation before baby boomers. And this may be the renaissance. Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of a renaissance. I love that we're having a renaissance conversation this morning that everyone else is having about quiet quitting. Hey, good morning, Ramona. I am not a fan of the term quiet quitting. It's being intentional about work. Yeah, about balance and equilibrium. Absolutely. Chris's second order consequence is excellent at work and excellence outside of work. That's a great point about equilibrium and balance. Yeah, I mean, the term quiet quitting, I mean, it's catchy, right? We live in a 140 character world where you've got to do the soundbite real quick. So yeah, that term does not necessarily resonate with me either, Ramona, but I love that they figured out a term that's going to get people's attention and force a conversation. So that part I do love about it. And Chris and Ramona are having a great conversation in the chat. So I love that you guys are interacting with each other. Chris says it all comes down to values and inspiration. Some value a balance of work and life, and that's great. Some value working more, and that's great. Some value live more, and that's great. It all comes down to values and inspiration. And I think this conversation of quiet quitting, what Gen Z is telling to us is they value things differently and they're inspired by things that are different. And I think Chris is right. Now, I had this conversation 2 Saturdays ago because I sit on two boards of two universities, and we were kind of talking about like what is today's 18, 19, 20, 21 year old looking for in life, and they're looking for impact and purpose. It's why the young man who asked me the question, I won't say his name, I don't want to out him here, that's why the young man who asked me the question, what does work mean for you, they're redefining values and their inspiration in a different way. So Chris, I think you're right about that, and it was a fascinating sort of panel conversation I ended up in a couple of Saturdays ago as well about this idea of the 18, 19, 20, 20 year, 21-year-old of today is not the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old that we were, right, in the 90s. Ramona says, great point. It's not a good, bad question. It's about evaluating where you are, creating and executing. 100%. Chris Rivera, good morning. Chris says, do you think employers and management teams should start the conversation and ask their team why do they feel like they're quiet quitting? 1,000%, Chris. Absolutely. I would absolutely, if your employee or colleague or peer is not going to initiate that question, then yes, your boss or your management team or employers should absolutely. Look, Chris, the reason why I say yes is because we're already having a different conversation about work. Can't tell you how many people I talk to. Eileen can chime in on this in the chat. People want remote work now. They want hybrid work. They don't want to go back in an office. So we're already fundamentally redefining what work looks like just by virtue of the fact that we're kind of having this in the office, out of the office. Do I want to be, we're kind of having this remote hybrid conversation anyway. So, yes, and let's be honest, that is being initiated by people who are looking for jobs or employees who are already there. So, yeah, why don't we ask employers and management teams, hey, people are coming to you saying I want to work remotely, I want to work in a hybrid environment, I only want to be in the office 1 or 2 days a week. Great. So why don't you meet your employees halfway and ask them what their priorities are now? Has their values changed? That's this whole idea that Eileen and I did some videos on last fall. This whole idea behind the great resignation and great reset is that people are reevaluating their values. So, yeah, let's start to have that conversation in the workplace, Chris. I'm all for that. Great. All right. Chris Prouty is coming in and he's going to explain. Okay. So, the immediate consequences are having a satisfying job and a life outside of work that is also fulfilling. But what do things look like as a result of that? Lower disposable income, social initiatives, slow growth, I gotta change my timing so these things stay on screen longer. Slowing business growth, acceleration of cultural endeavors, time will tell. So this idea of immediate consequence and second level consequence, like Chris is like the expert on that. But he's right. There's kind of a immediate consequence to this, and then there's going to be kind of a second order level consequence to that. So, Chris, you thanks for explaining that to folks. The problem with remote work is that the candidate pool is larger. Yeah, Eileen, I assume that makes it more competitive. I assume that is okay. I think you're answering my question. So you need to do everything in your power to rise above and become the candidate of choice. Yeah. So there you go. As we're having this redefinition of work conversation, then you can hear Eileen is saying it in the chat. Look, because people want remote and hybrid, and we're having these kinds of conversations now, the candidate pool is larger, right? So that's a whole different conversation. But we're already talking about remote work and hybrid work. So why not have a values, inspiration? I'm looking for something different, quiet quitting, boundaries, priorities. Man, we're throwing all the labels out there right now, but you guys get my point. If your boss is not initiating that conversation, feel free to initiate it with them. That is not a bad conversation to have. And if you don't want to initiate with them, okay, that's fine. But just understand as you make that choice to quiet quit or find balance and equilibrium, as Ramona said, or figure out second level order consequence of your choices, as we're having this conversation about the redefinition of work, what does work mean for you? And that's the question I want to continue to pose to all of you. Are you working to live or are you living to work. That is the idea behind quiet quitting. So, thank you guys for being here with me this morning. I love this conversation. I'm inspired by this conversation uh, about this redefinition of work and work what work means. I love that we're having this. I love that we're having this conversation. So thanks for joining me in the chat. I can see there are a bunch of people who are also over on Facebook, and I know you guys aren't commenting, but I know you guys are watching. So sorry, I have two cameras, and I have three cameras. Actually, I'm looking at the wrong camera. I'm over here. I know you guys are watching. I know you guys watch these videos. I know you don't comment, but you reach out afterwards. I invite you to reach out. I should have done it earlier. I invite you to reach out about this idea of quiet quitting. I love that you send private messages on Facebook and LinkedIn and you comment on YouTube where all my videos are stored. Let's have a conversation about quiet quitting. I am inspired by the question that the gentleman asked me on Tuesday. What is work? And what does work mean? So I'm inspired to have this conversation. Reach out to me and we will keep the conversation going. Until then, I will see you on I almost said Thursday. Is today? Today's Thursday. I'll see you on Monday for the next career conversation, these career tips. Guys, thanks for being here. I will see you next week.